going to take us decades to deal with, and I can guarantee you there are no companies and no financial institutions, and certainly not the Federal Reserve, that are ready for this, even though we know that it's been coming for 40 years. The core issue is going to be demographic. We are in the middle of a worker bust between the boomers retiring, large generation, and the zoomers entering the workforce, small generation. We're currently at a gap of about 400,000 shortage workers, or a shortage of 400,000 workers per year. You would think that would give a lot more negotiating power to workers. The only reason I don't want to underline that, I'm not quite sure, is because we are coming out of COVID and everything has yet to settle. But the mechanics certainly suggest that that is going to be the trend for the next few years. Well, as the joke goes, demographics move at two speeds, glacial and lightning. We know exactly what's going to happen this year. It's going to be the majority of baby boomers will turn 65 and will go into retirement. That has investment and tax applications, consumption and production implications. And we've known this is coming since 1965, when the last of the baby boomers were born. But when something only takes place over decades, you always think, oh, we've got time to adjust that later. Well, we're in the here and now, and we're actually dealing with the complications coming from the baby boomers leaving us.
Yeah.
That is going to take us decades to deal with, and I can guarantee you there are no companies and no financial institutions, and certainly not the Federal Reserve, that are ready for this, even though we know that it's been coming for 40 years. There are really only two countries in Europe that have managed to maintain a replacement level birth rate, France and Sweden. Everybody else has really passed the point of no return. In the case of the Germans and the Italians, that point of no return was in the 1990s. So there's really not a lot we can do there. The European Union has become an export union, and it is now starting to admit that it is completely dependent upon the United States as a consumption base and as a security guarantor. And that is starting to reshape their politics. We're still at the early stages of that process, but you're going to see a lot more change in terms of European policy next year as countries either admit the inevitable or rail against the dying of the light, or in the case of, say, France, going their own way because their demographics are fine. It's a big challenge for Europe to hold together in this environment before you even consider the fact that we now have a war on Europe's doorstep and they're starting to squabble over who gets what energy from what source. Next year is going to be very trying for the Europeans as all of these trends come to a head. So the birth rate bust that hit the advanced world also hit the advanced developing world just 30, 40 years later. And if anything, the birth rate breaks in the advanced developing world are faster and harder than what happened in the rich world. In order to make that demographic dividend stick, you have to be able to have an industrial system that takes advantage. But if you move into sub-Saharan Africa, there isn't much of a manufacturing footprint at all. Most of their incomes comes from raw material extraction and export without adding any value locally. What they've done in many ways is the worst of all worlds. They've used the income from those raw commodity exports to purchase things of the modern world, electronics, computers, food, and that's enabled their populations to grow without actually expanding their capacity to do things at home. That works so long as international capital keeps flowing and international supply chains keep running. But should those break for any reason, you're looking at catastrophic damage in the countries that haven't been able to pull themselves up.
To watch the full video, check out the link in the description below. What do you think of Peter's thoughts here? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found value in the content, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.